Geography and You presents.
Hello and welcome back to the GNY Live podcast series SAGAR Say, The Blue Deal. I'm your host Hiteshika, and today we navigate the deep and dynamic waters of India's blue economy, a space where tradition, technology, and territorial strategy converge. Joining us is the distinguished maritime strategist, Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, an officer of the Indian Navy and currently the Director General of the National Maritime Foundation. He is a prolific writer with over 95 published professional articles and papers, and also an advisor and fellow of several leading think tanks dedicated to maritime affairs and policy. We are joined by our discussant, Dr. Shulagna Chattopadhyay, Editor-in-Chief, Geography and You. She's a prominent figure in connecting science, policy, and public involvement on important environmental issues, having worked for almost 30 years in climate change, polar research, and environmental issues. I often reflect on our ocean, not just for its beauty, but for the promise it holds. From climate regulation to blue jobs and marine innovation, the seas can be both hope and our heritage. Therefore, let us find out what the Blue Deal entails. With that, I am delighted to pass the conversation over to Dr. Shulagna Chattopadhyay, who will navigate us through the tides of today's discussion. Over to you, Dr. Chattopadhyay.
Thank you. Thank you, Hiteshika. And we are very honored to have you, Vice Admiral Chauhan Sab. We had a short discussion a little while ago, and it was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a particular pleasure and a great honor to be here with Geography and You. We've done some good work in the past between the NMF and Lights, so I'm very happy to be here.
So let us begin with understanding the difference between blue economy, or what is blue economy versus what is ocean economy.
Okay, first of all, this is a really good question, and thank you. It allows me to address one of the central weaknesses in our intellectual understanding of the subject. So, first of all, let me start with the current economy. The current economy that we live in is a brown economy. It's a virus type of economy in which the economic model is based upon the behavior of a virus. A virus comes and it settles upon a host and it consumes all the resources of the host. And then when the host has no more resources to offer and is quite dead, then the virus hops off and goes to a new host. Now that's how a virus behaves, and that has been the economic model of the planet for a long time. Regrettably, as you are all aware, we do not have a planet B, and therefore this brown economic model is a non-viable model going forward. In other words, if you're going into the timeline of the future, then you come to the term sustainability, and this is therefore not sustainable. Then there is the green economy, and a model which is saying that we are the green economic model. And the green economic model differs from the brown economic model by simply saying that, look, all the resources that we extract from the planet must be done in a sustainable manner for the longest conceivable time frame, and that we cannot afford, if we could ever afford, any further degradation of the environment or deterioration of the biodiversity of the planet or the ecological balance that the planet has. That's the green economy. Now, the blue economy says both the things that the green economy said, but in addition, it says one central thing, and that is that the oceans are the font of all life on Earth. And therefore, if you mess around with the oceans, then you mess around with all forms of life on the planet. Now, if that's the difference between a brown economy or a brown economic model, a green economic model, and a blue economic model, then you will appreciate that we're not talking about the blue economy as some part of some other economy. So the blue economy is a model that attaches itself to the entire economy of the country. It isn't a satellite economy. The question isn't really how much can the blue spaces of our planet, which is the seas, the oceans, how much can they contribute to my economy? That's not the question. That's not the correct question. Obviously, if you ask the wrong question, you'll get the wrong answer. But the right question is, how blue is my economy? So let's say you're sitting here in Delhi, or we're sitting in, I don't know, someplace, Chhattisgarh, and we are far, far away from the oceans. So does the blue economy not impact us and we don't impact the blue economy? Let's say that you take a case of sitting in Chhattisgarh and you have a factory. What would you like to produce? I don't know. It's a forested area. Maybe you'll produce packing. Let's say you produce cardboard or you produce wooden crates. That's what your factory does. Okay, so it makes wooden crates. So obviously your factory will produce some waste, and that waste will be in one of two forms or both. It will be either in the form of liquid effluent, or it will be in the form of solid waste. Liquid effluent will simply flow from one water body to another until it reaches the ocean. But then you said, no, I don't have any. I don't have any liquid effluent. I've only got solid waste, and I put it into a landfill. Great. Then God comes along and makes it rain. Then when it rains, the rainwater leaches the toxins from the soil, and once again you move from one water body to another water body until you reach the oceans. So it's a pretty foolish concept to believe that you are somehow, by living in a hinterland area, somehow inured from the impact that you have upon the blue economy. What about the other way around? How does the blue economy impact you sitting in Chhattisgarh? So if you continue with the effort to run a model that is devoid of the centrality of the oceans, you will end up in situations where you have climate variable changes, you'll have extreme weather events, you have heat stress, water stress that will impact your forest cover. You will be impacted. So there is no way you can distinguish yourself from one to the other. Then, to your question about what's the difference between a blue economy and an ocean economy. Now, an ocean economy is certainly a part of an economy. So we can compute what is the value add that the ocean might deliver and its products might deliver. So you'll compute what are the resources in the ocean. You'll see, okay, so we've got living resources, we've got non-living resources, and we will compute the value of each of these as an add-on or an augmentation to our economy. But the blue economy is not, as I said, a part of some other economy. It's not some satellite economy. The blue economy is a model of your economy. The whole economy of your country is either blue, or it's not blue, or it's kind of sort of blue, or it's kind of sort of brown, or it's something. But it's the whole economy.
That's brilliant, actually. I mean, you bring in the centrality of the blue, that we are all actually blue economy. There is no other economy, like you said.
Exactly.
So that's very interesting. But I want to ask you one question here. I mean, just to counter from what you said, that you said it was satellite. We've treated, like economists treated like a satellite of all other economies. And first, where has this thought really come from? How is it emanated? And two, we've talked about this 4% as of now, GDP contribution to GDP of blue economy. So now if it's central, then it can't be, it'll be all of the GDP. So
let me try and explain this once again. Let's take the phrase, the blue economy. Now, first of all, when two people use exactly the same phrase for entirely different purposes, you're bound to cause confusion. So when Gunter Pauli used this particular phrase to describe how much job creation could be generated, he created the phrase blue economy. Then we didn't take that particular thing, and we said we conjoined these two words, blue and economy. So let's take the same point that I made earlier, blue economy, and say you make two columns and say blue economy, green economy, brown Economy. So which word are we talking about? Are we talking about economy? Are we talking about blue, brown, green? What are we talking about? If we are talking about economy, then you will ask the wrong question, as I mentioned, which is how much does the economy contribute? How much does the blue contribute? If you take the color, then you will ask how blue is my economy? How green is my economy? And when you say how green is my economy, you are no longer now into economics. So regrettably, I have spent many years trying to rescue the blue economy from economists.
Rescue.
Because if you keep looking at economists, I think that they do a marvelous job, but I don't think that the blue economy is understood clearly enough. So is an ocean economy a contributor? Whether it is, now you can argue whether it's 4%, 9%, something else percent, and that itself, that argument is deeply flawed.
How so?
Because you do not have any method of computing natural resource. For example, what should be the value we assign to a mangrove forest? Should it be the cost of the wood, the value of the wood? Should it be the value of the carbon that it sequesters? How should we compute the cost of a dead whale or a live whale? If a whale sequesters 63% of carbon, is that what we should compute? Is that not what we should compute? Should we only compute the value of the meat, the blubber, etc.? How much should be the value of a sea meadow, a coral reef? What should it be valued? And how do you convert that value? And if you did convert it, what would happen to your GDP? Would it grow? Would it shrink? I don't know. It would do one of the two. And then what would happen to last year's comparison with this year's comparison? Then what about your comparison with another country's comparison? In other words, the economic models that we are so familiar with, which we use all the time, will be stood on its head.
Yeah, it'll be absolutely different because everybody has different resources. So if you compute from resources point of view, the valuations itself would actually change.
So I'm saying that even if you took resources point of view, that means you're no longer talking about the blue economy. You're now talking about the ocean economy. You're pretending you're talking about the blue economy so that you sound better. But actually you're talking about an ocean economy. Even there, you are not. If you don't have double accounting systems in your accounting methodology, if your Department of Statistics is not alive to this, then I'm afraid you are going to be living for a significant period of time in La La Land. This doesn't seem like a particularly good place in which to live.
So moving on, if we can talk a little bit about mining, deep sea mining. It's a very important topic. Everybody, we have this SAGAR Matsya, which is supposed to go into 6,000 meter depth and supposedly bring out a lot of things. You were talking about cobalt a little while ago, and we talked a little bit about gas hydrates. But more interestingly, is there any country that is performing anything as a deep sea bed mining in the world?
If you're specifically asking me whether there's any country on the planet that is undertaking deep sea bed mining, the answer is no.
No.
Not a single country on the planet. Because no license has been afforded to any country by the International Seabed Authority. What everybody is doing is undertaking exploration. And deep sea exploration is being undertaken by India as one of the major players in this, and one of the earliest players, one of the pioneer players in this whole affair. And so there are a number of countries. First of all, there is a country that began, and Papua New Guinea at one point in time decided that they would undertake mining, albeit in their own exclusive economic zone and not on the high seas. Or not in what is called the area. The area is the seabed lying beyond national jurisdiction. So this itself caused so much. They contracted with a private company. The company undertook environmental impact assessments, and then they began the process of mining. At which point the world's watchdogs in a number of countries, by watchdogs I mean the intellectuals who look at this, the environmentalists, raised Cain. And they said, look, this environmental impact assessment is simply flawed in such significant fashion that renders it meaningless. And so, under pressure, the government of Papua New Guinea simply withdrew this whole license business. The company concerned suffered financial difficulties thereafter. I understand that they're back on more or less even keel, but they're not involved in mining anywhere. So are countries actually undertaking deep sea mining, by which I mean mining in the area? The answer is no. Did countries attempt, or are they attempting to do mining within the waters of their national jurisdiction, which means up to and including their extended legal continental shelf, or at least the exclusive economic zone? Yeah. India itself gave out a number of blocks on auction, and a lot of companies did bid, and then they ran into all kinds of legal difficulties, and finally the government declared that all of these blocks lay within the coastal regulatory zone, and so the whole thing went to court again, and right now there is no mining whatsoever in Indian waters. Is there mining in other countries, not internal, but in their exclusive economic zones? Probably difficult to say, but yes, there will be. Coming to the area, however, what we're all talking about is not that. We're all talking about deep seabed mining, for manganese nodules, for cobalt crusts and ferromanganese and all of that stuff. Whether it is in the central Indian Ocean area or it is in the Pacific, in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, for example. But no country is currently engaged in mining because the International Seabed Authority has simply not given any permission to anybody. And there's a huge amount of pushback on this to say, don't do this. Now, coming to our own efforts in terms of Matsya 6000, this is an effort to be able to put in place the mechanisms that you need, first of all, to undertake deep seabed exploration at those depths, because at those depths you get differing resources, and that includes a fairly recent discovery of what is called black oxygen, which is, that normally you need photosynthesis for the production of oxygen. And as you know very well, 80% of our planet's oxygen comes from photosynthesis of phytoplankton. But there is oxygen being produced simply by virtue of mineral interactions at very deep waters. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to get our pieces in place. We know that this chessboard will open at some stage with whatever safeguards, whatever mechanisms there are to make sure that the planet doesn't go completely into a blue-brown model. And so we're putting this in place.
But you did mention a little while ago that it's going to be a disaster if you really start mining
Of
the
course,
oceans.
because you know
Because
nothing.
You said
Look,
life starts from the oceans, and
it does. So
you are really playing with the origin of life.
Absolutely. So there are creatures that live in the deep waters of the ocean, and they generate, for example, this is just one example, they generate light not by photosynthesis, but by bioluminescence. Now, in this bioluminescent world, you shine a torch and you're only going to say, I'm only looking. I just want to see. That looking, what does it do to that particular bioluminescence? We have no idea. Will it damage it? Will it damage the food chain? We're interested in how the food chain works. And therefore, for you to start messing around in an area which you know very little about and there is not yet enough to even start, you need to exercise great caution. Are we exercising great caution in India? Yes, we are. We do have samples being picked up and then kept for a long period of study to see what happens to these samples. But this is the commencement of activity. On the other hand, you're being driven by the fact that there are mineral or non-living resources in the ocean, and you need those because you took a decision that you want to move away from fossil fuels, that you want to get into renewable energy, and in renewable energy you want to go for windmill and offshore winds, but to drive those offshore winds, you need supermagnets. For the supermagnets, you need rare earth elements. To get rare earth elements, you need to be able to do much more mining than you're doing, and that mining will be not vertical but strip mining. It will have significant implications upon your upon your ability to sustain the planet. Or you say, no, we're going to shift the whole everybody. India is one of the people on this bandwagon saying that let's all go to electrification of the transport sector. I think it's great. But how will you store electricity? You need batteries. How many types of batteries are there? There are only two types of batteries. There's nickel-cadmium batteries. There's lithium-ion battery. What do they have in common? Cobalt. So if they have cobalt, where's the world's cobalt? Something like 80% of the world's cobalt is in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yeah, Africa.
And you don't have any access to that. So you will create now a new geopolitical race. Instead of for the word oil or crude oil, read the word critical raw minerals.
Yeah.
And in what way will we have done ourselves a great favor in this regard? Because when we're talking about the whole transportation sector, we're talking about thousands of tons of cobalt. And if you ask people, how does cobalt occur? Does it occur naturally? Does it occur only in radioisotopes? How much earth is required to move 1 gram of cobalt? 1 kilogram of cobalt requires how much earth? How many ships? Where are those?
So that's terrible. So
There are problems.
basically, tell me something. I mean, I'm just being the devil's advocate here. Don't you think that coal mines and all the other stripping, the earth stripping behavior would reduce if we go into another new set of materials such as rare earth elements?
It might. The chances are that it won't. But the fact that it might, I mean, who can argue with that? Look, if you don't want to use coal because of its, even after you've washed the coal or you've imported coal and you want high calorific content from your coal and you don't have so much, all that. Let's say coal. And India has to import almost all its requirements of coking coal. So, non-coking coal. So if you take Indian coal, can we look at the direct gasification of coal? That means don't burn the coal. Compress the coal and have direct gasification. So this is a much more promising avenue. If we looked at gas hydrates, of which you spoke about earlier, if you didn't manage to, so India is a pioneer in gas hydrate exploration in conjunction with the Japanese, with the US, with India. I mean, India led a series of exploration efforts, and we have in the Krishna Godavari basin some of the richest
Deposits.
concentrates of gas hydrates. Then we don't know what to do. Suppose we don't get it right and we release all that methane into the atmosphere, then we will move from being heroes to being pretty much the villains of the piece.
Devils in
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that all these things are really exciting and they need very significant amounts of study and scholarship because only fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And I don't think that that's where we want to be.
Beautifully said, sir. So shifting a little bit from what you have said, like if we can talk about the Indian Ocean region and what we are talking about, the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative. So what are these two different entities? I mean, of course, you've been in the sector. You also have this IPRD that you organize every year, if I'm not incorrect. And so what is this Indo-Pacific idea above the Indian Ocean idea?
Okay, so the Indo-Pacific is a historical oneness of the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, which has remained valid from pretty much times immemorial, barring the 400 years of what we might call the colonial interregnum. And it was only in this colonial interregnum that an artificial divide was created between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean as a strategic space.
Okay.
So the Indo-Pacific seeks to restore this oneness. The Indian conceptualization in geographical terms of the Indian Ocean stretches across from the shores of East Africa all the way across to the shores of the western shores of the Americas, and not just the USA. And so that's a huge oceanic space, and we believe that this oceanic space is indeed the fulcrum of almost all geopolitical activity. If you look at this fulcrum example a little bit more, you will see that the world's economic pendulum, having artificially swung for about 400 years across to the west, is returning to its original place of rest, which is this whole business of what we call the Indo-Pacific. Now, the Indo-Pacific is a predominantly, but by no means exclusively, maritime space. It encompasses a fair amount of the continental littoral of the Eurasian landmass. And now within this, we have a policy. We have a stated policy. A statement of policy is always the statement of a desired end state. And our desired end state was reflected in SAGAR and now is reflected better in Mahasagar. But SAGAR itself just said that this is security and growth for all in the region. Now, we believe truly, as they say in colloquial Delhi, by God, we believe that the Indian economy cannot ride upon some crest while the economies of our neighborhood are wallowing in some trough. And so, therefore, our rise, our prosperity is entirely dependent upon the prosperity and rise of all our neighbors. This is our policy. SAGAR is not a vision. Mahasagar is not a vision. And I think Foreign Minister Jaishankar in his book, The India Way, has specified that SAGAR policy. But for some reason, we shy away from using the word policy. But never mind that. Now, to give first order specificity to SAGAR. See, people ask, what is happening in SAGAR? It was developed so long ago as a concept. What's happening in the policy? And I keep wanting to ask them, what have you been smoking? Because nothing is happening in a policy. A policy is a statement of your desired end state. But you do need to give first order, second order specificity to SAGAR. And the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, which was enunciated in 2019, it says that, this gives first order specificity. How does it do that? It says, there are 7 major maritime lines of thrust that we need to adopt. You're familiar with them, so I won't, in the interest of time, go down each one of them. And it says that this is not some grand plan of India, which you can either accept or reject or join or refuse to join or walk away from. This says that, does anybody have an idea about how we can solve this and how we can address these issues? And people say, I have an idea, and say, great, would you like to follow us? And they say, no. Okay, would you like us to follow you? They say, no. So would you like to go hand in hand? Maybe they'll say, no. You don't want us there at all? Any of them will do. Obviously, we hope it won't be the last one. But every other one will do. And so countries have stepped up to the plate and said, okay, I can do this. I have an idea. So Australia says, I can do environment, or the USA. And India is not in the lead in every one of those every one of those maritime lines of thrust. Now, the MEA calls those pillars. I have an allergy about pillars because as soon as you would use the word pillar, you imply a silo. Then it becomes my silo versus your silo versus her silo versus his silo.
Okay.
So we generally depict the IPOI as a deeply interconnected web of 7 spokes. And each one is connected to the other. You can't do anything on one without doing something to all of them. That's where the IPOI fits. So now we've got SAGAR, which has evolved to Mahasagar, which only encompasses more than one region. And it also acknowledges the fact that you cannot talk about security without using the prefix holistic. That will allow you to distinguish between military and hard security and security. Security is complex. Security is all-encompassing. There's human security, there's food security, there's environmental security. Do you trust your government? Does your government trust you? Yes, you have security. One of those answers is no, baby, you're in trouble in terms of security.
True.
So there is, security is a holistic term. Mahasagar gives recognition to this holistic nature of security. It gives recognition to the holistic nature of growth. So growth need not be simply restricted to economic growth. There is human growth. There is human growth with assured economic activity will lead to greater security than any one of them alone would. And so that's the correlation between the IPOI, which gives first order specificity. But clearly, first order specificity, it sounds good, even if it's difficult to pronounce. But it isn't going to be enough. You need to go to second order specificity. What project, which plan, what should the government do? And who's going to tell the government, if you do this, that, and the other, this might work. And then another government says, yeah, and I can do this or that or the other.
So that hasn't begun really yet.
It is.
2025.
It has begun. It has
Okay.
begun.
So,
It hasn't reached a stage where we can tom-tom it around to everybody saying that we've solved it, because it'll take a very long time to solve. And in the meanwhile, we'll have to work extremely hard to be able to get to a point where this second and third order specificity is provided. This is why we have the Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue, which takes one of these pillars or spokes or maritime lines of thrust and says, okay, let's talk about this one. And then let's try and work out something specific that emerges from it. And can we give specific recommendations to our specific governments? Because if, as think tanks, if I'm providing general inputs to generalists, my value add is zero. My comfort level might be 100%, but my value addition is zero. I have to be able to give specific policy recommendations, which the government will then adopt. Just bemoaning one fact or exulting over the other fact is not enough. It will give us great comfort, but it won't give us value.
yeah, so I know we've been talking on a kind of theoretical level today, but let me just ask you one question, because it's just on my mind and just came to my mind right away. So we have these areas beyond national jurisdiction.
Sure.
Yeah. And so there are fishing in the Indian Ocean region that other countries come and fish in our areas, and we really don't have too much deep sea fishing really. And it's one of the, like tuna, for example, is a very valuable resource as far as India is concerned. So tell me, with the neighboring countries that we have, say Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and all these other countries, is there a setup or a network where we can say that, I mean, I don't want to take names right now, but we know that many other countries are fishing in this area, and China has also said that Indian Ocean is not India's ocean.
Right.
So I mean, I just want to know in that perspective and also China's military exercises, for 3 consecutive years. So what are your views on
so
this?
you straddle a very large amount of subjects and topics here, and I'll try my best to encapsulate them. Look, if you talk about first of all, when we talk about areas, we have to be careful, because what we mean by areas are spaces, but unfortunately or fortunately, the word area means the seabed beyond national jurisdiction, and BBNJ is biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which is what we're really talking about in the bulk. When we talk about poaching, now you can't do poaching in areas beyond national jurisdiction because they don't belong to anybody. But you do have a need for regulation, because if, as you say, the Chinese, who have by several orders of magnitude the largest distant water fishing fleet in the world, are happily picking up all the fish which are migratory species, for example, tuna, before they enter your exclusive economic zone at all. And then they hang around and wait for countries and occasions in which national security agencies, maritime security agencies, either are ill-equipped or are inadequately empowered with capacity, or have poor capability, where capacity is material wherewithal and capability is human ingenuity. They then literally poach now in those waters. Then there is the issue of, are there regional constructs? Yes, there are. There's the Intergovernmental Organization for Bay of Bengal Fisheries, which is a particularly, laudatory organization, which deserves much more support than it gets. But if we're trying to do poaching, don't you need to know how much is your stock to start with?
Yes, absolutely.
And doesn't that require a certain amount of investment of human beings, of capability, of capacity? And so are we trying? Yeah, we're trying. Are we funding it adequately? No, we're not. So if you don't know what your stock is, you don't know what your maximum sustainable yield is. And if you don't know what your maximum sustainable yield is, you have no idea whether you're overfishing or you're not overfishing. So once again, these are not theoretical. These are real constructs. So when we deal with China, and we are looking at China and its ability to simply be a vacuum cleaner within the Indian Ocean, sucking up all the fish that exist, because in Indian waters, for example, you're quite right. It is only a marginal joke to say that in the Indian exclusive economic zone, fish die of old age. Nobody fishes them because there aren't enough. Now, why don't we fish? Are we terrified of the sea? That's not true. We've got really good fishing communities. So why don't we do that? Because each of these is tied up to another thing. For example, if you want to take to deep sea fishing, you need a larger vessel. You go over 30 meters in length, you are now falling under the Merchant Shipping Act. Now, are you going to be paying the kind of dues that a merchant ship will pay? Of course not. And so you won't build a ship that big. You won't build your boat. Therefore, you can't go. And therefore, the government now, this government, is trying its very best to recover from all of these situations. Then there are issues about adjacencies and the problems that lie there. So India is a long-standing member of the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, for example, which is one of the many commissions globally that look after specific either straddling fish stocks which straddle more than one exclusive economic zone or migratory fish such as tuna. And so we put in a lot of effort here. But what does that mean finally? It means you need to strengthen your Coast Guard. You need to be able to provide. But if you're going to hang on with that Coast Guard and say, no, you look after everything about internal security alone, then they don't have the wherewithal.
Correct.
So I'm afraid there are no easy answers.
Absolutely.
But there are really worthwhile answers.
No, we get a sense from talking to you, because I think you were very right. We are talking in silos when we are talking to different people. You've given that, the pan all India look and all world look, actually. Why India? So, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Vice Admiral Pradeep
Thank you
Chauhan,
very
sir.
much for your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay, and a heartfelt thanks to Vice Admiral Chauhan for sharing such valuable insights into the science, strategy, and security dimensions of India's blue economy. Today's conversation reminds us that our oceans are far more than vast stretches of the water. They are dynamic, living spaces that shape our economy, climate, and collective future. To our listeners, we hope this deep dive offered not just information, but a renewed perspective on the crucial role oceans play in national and global well-being. If you found this episode engaging, be sure to follow us on Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube. A detailed blog of this podcast will be soon uploaded on www.geographynU.com. Don't forget to check it out. Let's keep the dialogue going, stay aware, stay informed, and stay ocean-wise.